Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room, guys. I hope you're well today. Today we're going to be talking about the INFJ's unique brand of Fe. Now, before I move on to this topic, do keep in mind that I've written a book on the INFJ type, the Ecstatic Soul. Look at this lovely cover. It's available for less than $10 at the links in the description box below, ebook and paperback format. All the Amazon links to all the Amazon websites. If you have a question, you can ask me. It's a really profound investigation of the type. If you already have a solid knowledge, but you would like to go deeper, go further, this is the book to get. Now, why does the INFJ have a unique brand of Fe? I want to emphasize that a lot of people might not easily be led to believe they are INFJ, even though they very well might be INFJs, because they do not necessarily resonate with descriptions of extroverted feeling. The common descriptions of extroverted feeling coincide with putting the group above the individual, and in other words, demonstrating a certain level of primary altruism. That's one of the descriptions of Fe, being helpful, altruistic, reasoning in terms of the group, and so on and so forth. We have a number of Fe users among the 16 types, precisely 8. Now, of those 8, only 4 have Fe either in a dominant or in an auxiliary position, and they are the types that we're going to be most interested in here. So, of course, Fe dominance, we have ENFJ and ESFJ. And for Fe auxiliary, we have ISFJ and INFJ, the type that we're most interested in, because this channel is mostly looking at the topic of INFJ, although not only INFJ, but you know what I mean. And I would like to argue that among these 4 types, the INFJ is the one whose typical use of Fe is least likely to be identified as typical, prototypical kind of use of Fe as recognized in the textbooks and the articles. And in turn, this might explain why some INFJs might be unwilling to see themselves as INFJs, because they think to themselves, I'm too individualistic to be an INFJ. My individualism is not easily reconciled with the use of the Fe function. Or they might think the group is a weight on my shoulders, and I'd rather be away from the group than with the group. These types of reasoning, the idea that one is not exactly altruistic, as the articles describe it, might lead one to think, well, either my Fe is too low in my stack to be INFJ, or I'm really maybe an Fi user undercover, or something like that. And there are reasons why an INFJ might think like this. Because the descriptions of extroverted feeling are not really, on their own, attuned to the INFJ's existence and experience of their extroverted feeling. I think that the descriptions of Fe you find online can pretty much be considered to square with FEUs in the 3 other cases, really, for different reasons, but the result is roughly the same. Now let's look at each of these cases in turn. The one type whose FEUs is most correlated with descriptions we find of it online is probably the ESFJ, because number 1, they're dominant Fe users. Number 2, they're extroverts, therefore they're social, therefore the group is their go-to. And thirdly, they're SI users, meaning, pretty high SI users, auxiliary function SI, meaning that the way things are done, the way things have been done in the past, is the primary yardstick of how to proceed about the future, meaning that there is an inherent respect for the past. And the past itself is not individualistic. It's by definition transpersonal, it's interpersonal, it's everything you want except individualistic. So there is a sense in which Fe and Si in that combination complete each other quite well. And moving on to the case of the ISFJ, I would say that although the ISFJ does not fulfill the criterion of extroversion, ISFJs are introverted, of course, and their Fe function is auxiliary. Because it is attached to Si, we have again Fe being deployed at the service of this respect for tradition, respect for the past, respect for established patterns, which are impersonal in the sense of interpersonal, things that have been achieved by people before, not just a single person. The ISFJ, for this reason, is often conceived to be the most extroverted of introverts, and I think that's correct. Of course, there will always be exceptions. And is very much using Fe in the way that we expect it to be wielded when we read the literature online. ENFJs, you might argue, well, ENFJs don't have Si. In fact, Si is pretty weak in ENFJs, and that's true. Now, they fulfill the criterion of extroversion and the criterion of Fe dominance. Now, they don't have Si. But I think that the fact that ENFJs are Fe dominant and extroverted, but also the fact that despite not having Si, they have pretty developed SE a lot of the time as a tertiary function. ENFJs, as you probably know, are highly social people. The best way really to distinguish between INFJ or ENFJ to figure out which one you are is to really ask yourself, am I introverted or extroverted? If you even doubt what you are, you're probably either INFJ or ENFP, because that's usually the hesitation there, because ENFPs can be relatively introverted for extroverts. It doesn't really happen so often with ENFJs. ENFJs are projected into the social world, very extroverted type by nature. And with the Fe dominance, the relatively well-developed sensation function, they also fulfill the Fe function as described, pretty to a T. And now we have the case of the INFJ. The case of the INFJ is very different because, as I will show in a second, they fulfill none of the criteria, the three criteria that I have listed. Consider this. Extroverted, obviously, INFJs are not. Fe dominance, obviously, INFJs are not. Finally, are INFJs proficient SI users? I think one of my cats is one of my cats got under the covers, so we should expect this book to fall very soon. Wow, I hadn't expected that. I have two cats and they're both on the bed. One of them is there sleeping. I think you can see him, but there's another one who's literally like under the covers and making a mess. That's Bash, the black one, and Cookie is the other one under the covers. Anyway, sorry for this little side. INFJs obviously don't have strong SI. SI could be considered in many ways to be their most unconscious, weakest function, as their eighth function. So, God, you really don't have a lot of anchors for Fe in this case. I mean, Fe is auxiliary, sure. It's attached to Ni, which is a very individual function. It's important to emphasize that Si and Ni, although they're both perceiving functions, although they're both introverted functions, the way in which both functions operate is such that Si will in practice orient the individual to be less individualistic, and you can see this everywhere. Si dominants tend to not be that individualistic because they always have as their perceptual sort of orientation framework what is inherited, what has been established, not by one person, but by a group, by a large group, large enough to conceive a tradition. Ni is not very much like that. Ni is oriented to the future rather than the past, to possibility rather than actuality and what has been established. And that by definition means that Ni is actually extremely individual. And so Fe is attached in the case of the INFJ to a highly individual and individuated function that can only be existentially fulfilled, if you believe at least the arguments I make in my book, by coming to grips with the uniqueness of its insights and its intuitions. Fe can certainly be deployed in this case to enlist other people in this project in such a way as to collaborate around the insights of introverted intuition. But we are already a little bit far from the description of Fe that we typically encounter. Altruistic in a selfless sense? Sometimes, yes. Maybe in the case of Fe-led INFJs, type 2 Enneagram, that kind of thing. But a lot of INFJs would not recognize themselves in this notion of altruism. Their altruism would usually be through the lens of NI, an empathic, abstract kind of altruism, trying to understand the other, giving the other the time to express themselves. Also, in turn, to be further analyzed by the INFJ, because they love that, nourishes their NI, and it gives some TI something to grind. So the Fe of the INFJ is really something which can either be relatively repressed, which is not a good thing, because then the INFJ becomes solipsistic. But because of the individualism of NI, that is possible much more than the case of the ISFJ, for example. Or Fe is deliberately deployed as part of a project at the center of which is the INFJ. So, and this project has an intuitive abstract nature. In other words, Fe in the INFJ is never far removed from the abstraction which is the domain of the INFJ and where they can best express themselves. So the altruism of the INFJ is very often too abstract to fit the descriptions given in online articles. If we could read our psyches, if our psyches spoke the same language as us, INFJs would be seen as altruistic, and no INFJ would ever think, I don't use Fe enough to be INFJ. But our psyches speak the language of the unconscious, or at least a mix of conscious and unconscious. And so in the meantime, we'll have to rely on our intuition to understand the unique way in which INFJs use Fe, and I hope this video was helpful. My book is still standing, so I consider that a success. If you enjoyed the video, consider dropping a comment, giving me a like, and subscribing. And I'll see you soon, guys. Bye-bye.